And I think it's actually a good lesson of like, if you're trying to get into one of these really hot companies, like you have to stand out. And I remember just being like, wow, they're like building a machine. And that really got me interested. I always tell people really honestly, like, if you have a problem I can fix, I'm going to sell you something, but I'm not here to sell you something yet.
People want to make an impact in their first 3 to 6 months. So reaching out, just saying like, hey, would love to float an idea by you.
Yeah, you're really, just getting some way to create some form of.
You move the ball forward.
And I was like, can I just sit with you for like 4 hours on a Saturday and learn what the hell you're doing? Do that thing. People say they do it, they don't. Like, you can do it way more. That's one thing I think people don't do enough. You're taking a shot, you're leaving a big opportunity to go start this because you feel conviction in something.
What would be some plays that like you have 0 customers or you have 2 customers and you have 1 week or else you get fired?
What do you have that is unique? Like, you have something.
The inaugural VibeScaling podcast, episode 1. We just had a great conversation with Todd Busler, CEO of Champify. We talk all things 0 to 1 sales, Todd's career arc, which started football player at Penn into SAP, one of the first sellers at Square, founding AE at Heap, where he saw that from 300K of ARR into 40 million. After that, a 6-year run went into VC at Unusual Ventures on the go-to-market ops side, and then making his way now to CEO of Champify, leading sales tech software company. And I think what was really awesome about this episode, we go through how to be really intentional in your career, how to choose the right go-to-market op, a lot of things that we blog about on GTM. Really great episode for those that want to learn a little bit more of that intersection of go-to-market, startups, and AI, which is a big part of what VibeScaling podcast is. Definitely give it a listen, and I hope you enjoy it. Dude, super pumped to have you on this. And I feel like you and I, whether it's LinkedIn, many of Zoom's texts throughout it, and when you were going to be in New York, I was like, we got to have you on as the inaugural VibeScaling podcast. And yeah, just a quick overview. And like, we'd love to just jump into your background a little bit. So football at Penn. Right out of that, went to a SAP solution engineer, which is always great to see kind of a technical background into selling. Square as one of the first 10 reps. And then founding AE at Heap from about 300K to 40 million. Quite a good run there. I'm excited to dive in. Then, did a switch, which a lot of people are contemplating. So I want to tap in a little bit like the VC. You leave Heap after quite a long run of AE into like heading up sales there into Unusual Ventures. We're actually like, it seems like there's a little bit of a mafia that was there, whether it was with like Dakota and Liam and yourself. So that'll be interesting to hear more of. And then now CEO of Champify. So, I mean, when I thought about people we wanted to have on, your background is awesome for this. And it's a lot of what we write about in the blog. So hopefully I did a decent job. Would love to just hear a little bit more of like just that progression of the career. And
yeah, I mean, basically, I went to Penn. Everyone kind of goes in finance consulting, and I actually interviewed to do the Wall Street thing. And I remember getting feedback on the interview, and the guy, I came here with a shitty suit and went into Bank of America or whatever the big building was. And I did the interview, and the guy at the end, like very straight face, was just like, I feel like you're not really that into this.
Yeah.
And I was actually like, you're right. Like, I'm trying to convince myself I want to do this thing, but I really don't, I'm not that interested. I don't want to do this every day. And everyone had always said like, you should do some type of sales. So I started at SAP. I didn't even know what a sales engineer was. Like, I thought I was going to sell software, and they're like, no, you kind of like learn the solution, do the demos. And I did that. And I think it was a really good start, actually. I think people really undervalue those big company training programs, because like you just learn so much in like with other smart people. That I was in a group of 12 people, like all of them are like running big teams at big public companies or starting their own companies. Like it was a good group of talent. And I think the sales engineer is an interesting way to start. Like, many people go like the pure BDR track into sales. Yeah. I think actually what I did is going to become more popular. You're seeing a lot of these technical people that are now like, wait, you can be the salesperson. So I'm happy I did that. Square, I was kind of like, hey, I'm into this tech thing. I got to get to San Francisco. How can I go do that? And I just started applying to a bunch of jobs. Square was one I got. They were nervous about taking me on because I never had a quota. And I was like, look, this isn't that complicated. Like, right. I think I can figure out how to sell this super SMB. At the time, they were moving from like farmer's market to multi-location coffee shops, super SMB.
Yeah.
I remember for the interview, I went and made friends with someone who had Square in my neighborhood, like an empanada shop.
Smart.
And I was like, can I just sit with you for like 4 hours on a Saturday and learn what the hell you're doing? So I was like, I got to go above and beyond in this interview. So I went and made friends with this guy. I sat there, watched how he's doing his books, everything, inventory, all this stuff. So I went to the interview. They're like, oh shit, okay, like you're taking this serious. And I think it's actually a good lesson of like, if you're trying to get into one of these really hot companies, like you have to stand out. Um, did that for a little while, met really smart people there. Like I mentioned, Beth was super early at Box, and there's people that have gone on to start companies. And I just saw like, holy shit, this is what product velocity looks like. And I didn't know all of these things that were going into a sales organization. Cause at SAP, it was like, all right, you're the AE, you're the sales engineer. Like, yeah, there's a couple overlay roles, but I wasn't exposed to like forecasts. I wasn't exposed to enablement. I wasn't exposed to how do you hire these people? How do you figure out territories? And I think Square had really smart RevOps early on. And I was remember just being like, wow, they're like building a machine. And that really got me interested. But I very quickly was like, all right, this is pretty SMB. And I had friends in San Francisco that I knew I was smarter than and willing to work way harder than. I'm like, wow, they're making tons of money at Twilio or whatever the hot company was at the time, right? And I was like, all right, I got to go to a company that has bigger deals. Like ultimately, that was what I realized.
I see.
And it was big. The only two things I was looking for is go early so I could solve more problems, and is there a path to much bigger deals? That was like the pure like only thing I was thinking about. And then joined Heap at 5 people, first AE. Like they'd only like swipe your credit card.
So you were the 6th employee at Heap?
Yeah, 6th employee.
Okay.
Really smart engineers, mostly young Stanford, CS, classical SF story. And I learned a ton there. And like just every time is like, get smart people, figure this thing out. I think they were really mature, forward looking to basically be like, all right, let's bet on some of the young, hungry talent and then surround them with some good mentors. So like at different points, I had Jim Hairbold, who was the CRO at Box. I remember interviewing with Kyle Parrish to come help us. Sam Blum was someone I talked to. Like all of these guys were like, either involved in helping us in some way, shape, or form. And for me, I was like, man, every time I get to interview one of these people to be my boss or as a mentor, I'm like sitting here jotting notes, learning everything. I'm like, because none of this shit's really rocket science, but you have to see it a couple times, right? So that was the Heap journey. And then I was basically like just sick of the same problem over and over. I loved Heap. I had a great career. They had a good outcome. Like everything was good.
I remember hearing you start getting into larger, as the company gets bigger, a lot of forecast meetings.
Yeah, it's just like, it's different. Like I really like the 0 to 10 where you're like, the competitive positioning is changing every day. You're trying to win your first deal in 3 different verticals. You're trying to like, I like that part. It's like the renegade or, Jason Lemkin calls them the pirates or the romantics or something, right? Like I like that. I had a lot of fun doing it.
Gets that from Steve Jobs where Steve's like, do you want to join Apple, aka the pirates, or IBM, the Navy? And you got to figure out, are you a pirate or
right? Do you want to do
sailor?
that thing? And for me, I love that thing. But then you get to like 30 million plus. And now maybe that number is even later for how fast these companies are growing. But like you're quickly in a bunch of forecasting calls and there's a little bit more politics and it's the cross-functional stuff. And I was like, I'm not having as much fun. And part A and part B is just like after 6 years of thinking about the same exact problem every day, you have new execs that are like, oh, we can do this. I'm like, look, we thought through this already. Like, I was just like, I need a break. So I took 3 months off and randomly got hit up by John Veronis, who started Unusual Ventures. And I mainly went there because I was like, okay, I can learn about venture from the other side, right? Like I'd been in board meetings and I was somewhat involved in helping raise some money at Heap. And then I was like, let me learn about this from the VC's vantage point and let me just see a wider breadth of companies, right? Because I'd really just saw Heap. That was the only run. So I met Liam and I met Dakota and I was like, all right, there's some smart guys here thinking and tweaking on all this early stage stuff. Let me go do this for 6-18 months. I'll figure out what next. That was basically it.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much I want to dive into a little bit more. The first is, I think it's like, we were even chatting before this and the intentionality around your own career. I think before we jump into like the Heap stuff, you had mentioned something. I saw this at Columbia. You saw it at Penn where it's like banking consulting. Someone actually starts to push you and they say like, well, why are you actually doing this? And I think that like, it'll be interesting to touch on this a little bit later in the episode of like certain decisions. But when you think through like when you were making the decision to not go into those and into sales or into Heap, like professionally and personally, like what were the things going through your mind of that intentionality, like looking back? Or maybe it was, you didn't think about it, but what would you maybe tell other people when they're thinking through?
I think the first job early on, like it was really just, I remember that interview completely. And it was like, the guy was like, you don't really want to do this. And in my head, I'm like,
You
how
said
does he
like,
know
or
that?
she,
Like
yeah,
me,
yeah,
like
yeah.
I prepared, like, don't get me
Yeah,
wrong. Like
yeah.
I took it really serious. I talked to all my smartest friends a couple years ahead. And I think I was just like not that into it. And I
Yeah.
couldn't really fake it. And I'm really grateful that that happened. On the Heap thing, it was just like, I remember just thinking, okay, I'm going to learn a ton here. And in 6 to 9 months, the thing's either going to be growing really quickly, or in San Francisco, no one cares if you took a shot at an early stage company. It doesn't work. And in many ways, it's actually applauded, right? So I was like, all right, I'm going to take a shot here. I know what the path looks like if I stay at Square, which is good. And some people have done really well there.
Mhm.
But for me, I was like, there's so much upside if I do this and it works. And there's really not that much downside. And I'm 25 years old, so it doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah. When you think through like the decision to join Heap, heard you on a couple podcasts where you're like, hey, market pull was decent. We're getting some decent inbound leads. You guys sound like you were before the mixed panels and then way before the Pendos of the
Right
world. Like,
after the mixed panel.
okay,
actually.
you were.
So what
Okay,
happened was
interesting.
mixed panel was super hot at the time. They raised like
Yeah, I remember them being. I remember that being
they
like
were like
everybody
the
was
darling,
trying. Totally,
100%.
totally.
And basically, it was like, I had no idea because I never, did product analytics. So I went to like the 10 smartest engineers I knew at Square, and I was like, what do you think about this thing? Like, is this becoming a space? Would you use this thing? They have this one little differentiator that proved to be like sizable. And almost everyone was like, yeah, this is becoming a thing. People are investing money in this.
Yeah.
There's going to be multiple players. Like that was about the extent of the diligence. That was it.
Well, let's like dive into that a little bit, because one of our GTM, we've written this twice. We've done a remix on it, 11 traits that make a hot sales job. And of course, one and two is like talent density and market pull.
Yeah.
Market pull being inbound. I've heard you take this a little bit step further of word of mouth. I guess like knowing what you know now, there's a lot of folks that we work with at VibeScaling, and just like my own friends who hopefully they'll listen to this. But how would you think through joining? You interview the engineers, but like 10 years later, if you were joining right now and you're in your 20s, walk us through how you would think through.
I think it's harder now, and I'll explain why. But
Yeah.
at the time, my logic was this, like, okay, is this category becoming a thing, right? Like Mixed Panel was getting funded. Heap had just got funded. Amplitude was right around. I'm like, all right, a bunch of investors think this is becoming a thing. When I got the job and went through the interview process, I really respect both the co-founders, but one I sat with is this guy named Ravi, brilliant guy. And I was like, can I just sit with you for like 4 or 5 hours? I want to see what you're doing, how this is working. And what I was seeing is there's a lot of inbound. Like, and there was a bunch of people all kind of saying the same thing, which is like, hey, I like the idea of this product analytics thing. We have maybe looked at Mixed Panel, and I think the way you're going about it's right. But there was a lot of inbound. And sure, it was mostly nerdy hacker news, smaller companies, but like there was some pull for the thing. And then I was like, all right, talk to me about how you're pricing this and how you're doing your first couple deals. And it was evident that he had no idea what he was doing. He's a technical founder. He never did sales. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Like if I can take those conversations and do like even a basic level of value selling, there's like real thing here.
Yeah.
Now you don't know like how big it is going to be or if it's going to continue, but it was like, there's pull, there's inbound, there's really smart engineers moving fast, and there's word of mouth. I think word of mouth is like the biggest thing.
How do you test for that though?
Because we would see it in inbound. You would see it like they had a self-attributed what's happening.
Okay, so it's even
and it was
like,
hey, someone I worked with told me to check this out. Or,
interesting. Okay,
and
so in the forum sometimes
in the
it's
forums
like,
or in conversations, because in the beginning, you're trying to figure out where people are hearing us
and
from.
you don't put too many fields. You just want them to
right.
like,
It's just like,
so
where do
then
you
you
hear?
can,
I still do that now at Champify, and I think it's one of the most important things, right? Because like you don't really know, especially now. There's podcasts, there's LinkedIn posts, there's all this other stuff happening. But like a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I told my friend about this, and he just signed up, and I was like, huh, okay. There's some early inklings of that.
So like when I think through, it aligns like what we said is like, what's the Pareto 80-20 of like, if I can only pick 2 or 3 things, it's talent density and it's market pull. I think like breaking those down a little bit more, talent density, where are the engineers coming from? Also, maybe if there's an existing sales team, how do they like, where are they coming from? And like, how do they think through sales? On the market pull side, it's like, sure, inbound, but it's actually like, hey, do you have a split of how they typically find out about you? And if it's Google, that's one thing. But if you're getting like 20, 30% plus of, I heard about it from a fellow product,
for sure,
as in Heap's case. Yeah.
I think there's 2 other things there. On the word of mouth side, it's also like, in the beginning, you don't know how to price software. Pricing software is really hard. So at some point, and I remember this very vividly, the CEO would be like, I want you to try to charge way more for this. And I'm like, okay, like, what do we think? Right.
Yeah.
But you have to do that because you don't really know where the limit is.
Yeah.
And like what we could see is like when we tried to do that, now I didn't know this until after I started, right? But what I started to see was like most of the conversations when you tried to raise the prices quite a bit were like, hey, this is hard. This is like more than we expected, but people wanted to do it. Right. So it's like, all right, they really need this thing, right? They really need this thing. You could also see when we got into an organization, it would spread. Like you could very quickly see one person signs up, they set it up, they're inviting a bunch of people. I'm like, okay, people are getting real value for this. The one thing that I think people don't think a ton about as a pure rep standpoint is like, what exactly do you want as the rep? And I think one thing that matters a ton is, and in the early days, you're trying to figure out quotas. It's pretty hard, but like, I think the ratio between the average deal and the quota is really important, right? So like, I have a younger guy I worked with at Heap back in the day, and he's asking me now, he's interviewing at a bunch of AI companies. And I say, look, you can go to a company that has a lot of inbound, they're doing 30, 40K deals, and you're playing a volume game, right? And that's fine. You can go make a lot of money doing that. You'll make a lot of, you'll get a lot of reps early in your career. I think it's amazing.
Right.
But like, it's going to be hard to blow out your number if you have to do 25 deals in a year, right? I think on the flip side, I have friends that have stayed at SAP where like you basically do one big deal or not, right? So like I think thinking about that sweet spot of like, how many deals do you have to do in a year, or like how big can one deal make up what percentage of your annual quota if you're trying to maximize for the earnings part, right? Like I think people don't think about that enough.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, it's funny though, you'll have people actually like to sit in that space because it's that dopamine hit of like quick deals, but then eventually you grow out of that. Or some people do.
And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're really good at that and you can qualify and you have a high inbound win rate and you optimize your velocity and you're really good at systems, like you can do great. It's just like, what game do you want to play there, right? Yeah. What are you trying to optimize for?
Totally. So the run and Heat, I mean, it was interesting to hear like kind of your framework now. What are the things that you would optimize, or like if you're trying a new role? There's a lot of people listening who are going to be interviewing at these AI native companies, ones that we're hoping to help place at. I guess at Heap, tell me a little bit more about like just some of the learnings, because we do place for a lot of these founding AE roles, AE, SDR, BDR 1 through 10, a lot of times. For folks who are maybe like, hey, is it the right role? How would you say like, hey, I want to be AE1, I want to be AE10, and then maybe go to a Series D or E company? How would you start to think about what it is that, it kind of goes back to this optimization of what you want in your career. How would you think through like which one is the right fit for someone?
Yeah, I think it's what you said, which is like, what am I trying to optimize for? Like most of the time, the founding AE is not a good bet. Right? Like you're probably going to make less money. You're going to work way harder. You're not going to have any help. You're not going to have the systems. You're going to be up at night trying to figure shit out on sales ops or things you don't like. That's just the reality of it. For me, I was like, wow, I got exposed to all of these parts of the machine at Square. I wasn't doing all of them, but I got exposed, and I was like, if I go here, I'm going to learn a ton and just get exposed to a ton of things. And I figure out a very similar, slightly kind of different version of the Jason Lemkin comp plan for the early stage rep. That's basically what we had.
Right.
And my logic was like,
remind me of what that is. I listen to so much of this stuff.
Which is essentially, the numbers have changed now because this was like 10 years ago. But essentially like you pay for your base salary. So if you have, let's just say for simple math, at the time it was actually like 60K base. It was like, okay, you have to close 5K in ARR. And then above that, you get a very big, clear percentage of the deal.
Got it.
Right? 25% or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there like, okay, if this goes well, I can make a lot of money, right? Like if I can get bigger deals, if I can, you break into some bigger companies, like there's a lot of upside on that. But for me, it was like learning and potential upside. And if it's not going to work, I'm going to know really quickly.
100%. I think what's interesting about that, I'm a huge Tim Ferriss nerd. He says, pick your project based on if you lose, you'll still win. What's interesting about the founding AE role, now I've been a fractional founding AE role at AE, but a fourth AE, so not full-time directly in it. But I knew that if things didn't go well, I was going to learn so much. And I don't want to assume for you, but I'll speak for me. It's made me I tried founding a company in business school. And then now with VibeScaling, I feel like I picked up so many of those skills that I was forced to learn that I'm seeing a lot of my, buddies from Salesforce rolling into these deals doing no work. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing in this early stage? And then all of a sudden it hits. And I'm like, okay, this got me to this, like all these things that I was working on late night that may have not led to anything there. It was like that skill of how to figure something out from 0 to 1. And that's what they mean by that 0 to 1.
But you have to want that. Like
Yeah, yeah.
you and I are wired
yeah.
the same way. Like for
Yeah,
me, I was
totally.
liking that. Like, look, my friends that after SAP went to Workday, like, yeah, they were making way more money, right? Like,
Yeah.
but to me, I'm like, I don't really want to do that. I'm one rep of 500 and I'm just kind of following this rigorous, strict standard playbook. I'm like, I'm going to go learn a ton here. And that's what I was trying to optimize for. And luckily it worked out too, right? Like it was pretty good outcome.
And how long were you at? 5 or 6 years?
6 years.
6 years. So first AE all the way to VP of sales. What I typically hear is like, all right, I'm a VP. I want the CRO gig. You end up doing something that a lot of people are thinking about of like, let me actually eventually maybe go into VC, right? Two sides of the same coin, early stage, especially go to market. And then being on the VC side, I know Unusual is very unique in this regard. One of the few firms that has this sort of baked out go-to-market ops team. How are you thinking about that? Okay, I'm 5 years in, or maybe it started a little bit earlier. VP of sales, maybe going to CRO route. It's from what I've heard, it sounds like that was going to light you up. But you end up going VC. So how did you think through that?
Yeah, so there was one unique thing that happened. Like I became the VP of sales, and then I worked under 2 different CROs, and I learned a ton from them. And most people are like, "Oh, I can't get topped. How can I make sure I'm doing that?" I was actually excited to have someone come above me because I was realizing like I was kind of hitting my wall. And like, yes, the team liked me. We were driving a good performance culture. I was learning a ton as I went just by like brute force of networking with people and learning and getting all the free advice I could and paid advice from some people.
Yeah.
But I was excited to have someone above me. And I think there was a really good CRO named Neil George, who I'm still very close with. And he was, I think, very EQ, smart, understood the human side. And he was like, okay, what you're doing here is not broken. Like this thing's working. Keep doing this thing. I'm going to go solve a couple of these other problems above.
He's looking at a 30,000 foot view.
100%.
And the reps that you haven't seen before, you learn it once, you'll never do it again. But like, if you don't know, you don't know.
For sure.
Yeah.
And like they could just see around some corners that I didn't know. Like I remember very vividly, like we were setting up a comp plan. He's like, look, what's going to happen in 6 months because we're going to add
around the corners.
And I was like, oh shit. Yeah, that's right. Like rocket science, no, but I never saw that. Right. So they're like, you know what I mean? I think I started to see like, okay, post 25, 30 million, I was like, I don't really like that job that much. Like what the CRO is doing. You're on a plane a ton. You're doing a lot of recruiting.
So if I'm hearing you, it was you were seeing, it's why I left consulting. I didn't want my partner's job, right? So you look above you and you saw, okay, I like what I'm doing now, but that's my next move. I don't want to be doing like your energy.
Yeah, that's the next move.
Zapped.
I wasn't really that excited about it. Now, like pure dollar and cents, like that would have been smart, right? Like, okay, you just did it, go do it again in another company. Now you don't need to start as a rep. You start as VP of sales. You probably have a shoe into that CRO role if you're not messing it up. But I wasn't that excited. Like what I really lit me up was like 0 to 10 million at Heap of like figuring everything out, making a new deck every single week, figuring out a new pricing every couple quarters, like new competitive talk tracks, a ton of involvement in the product team. Like I liked being more of that like versatile athlete, figure it all out than just like, here's the playbook. Now go take it from 25 to 50 reps.
So what was the intro then to John? Okay, I'm not going to get the CRO route. I don't even know if I want to just keep doing this in more reps, land at Unusual. And for those that don't know, Unusual is usually like they have an ops team that goes in as almost that fractional jack of all trades, GTM, getting the initial design partners and all of that. And then you ran a lot of reps there on there. So tell us a little bit more. So you're like, okay, I actually want to think through the VC route, but then is it investor? Is it more that's go to market? Like what was the...
For me, it was really like, hold on, I don't want to jump all the way back into one company. I think that was the first thing. I was like, let me take a step. I took 3 months off. I didn't even open my computer. I didn't do anything. And
you're a big surfer.
Yeah, I went and surfed and learned Spanish. I went to Peru. Yeah.
Peru, okay. Yeah.
And now I met my wife and that's it. Like,
oh, wow.
I was like, I want to take a couple months off. I did that. I highly recommend if you're in the position to do it because like you don't realize how wound up we are in these companies. And like it took me like 3 weeks to realize like, oh, this is what your shoulders are supposed to feel like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the founder of Heap knew John Veronis, who started Unusual, and he said, hey, like this guy's really good at early stage. So he just hit me up and say, hey, we have this role, help our portfolio companies. And I was like, oh, that's a great like next step. I don't know how long I'll do it, but I can learn VC from the other side. Instead of seeing just Heap really deep, I can probably see 4 to 6 different companies really deep.
Yeah.
And my logic was I'll either see if I get excited about that first head of sales thing again, and I'll jump into one of those companies as like way more pre-vetted than any other way you can do it through an interview cycle. Or maybe I like the VC thing and I try to become an investor, which I was not at Unusual Ventures. Or, hey, I've had desires to start a company. If I can go see a bunch of pitches and a bunch of early stage companies, that's a good launching pad if I want to do that.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, there's a couple good options that can come from this. I made way less money to go do that, but I was like, okay, I'm going to learn a ton. It's going to be a relatively short period. And I'm going to work with some really smart people like Liam, who was in Dakota, which were reasons why I went there. Cause I was like, all right, we're kind of figuring this thing out together at a handful of different companies in different spaces. Yeah. And then the unusual model is basically like, now you got to remember this, like at the time where the market was on fire and people were raising huge seed rounds on like a deck and idea, different time. But they would basically say like,
is it that different? I mean,
yeah, maybe not. Maybe we're back to not different time.
The more we stray away, the more safe.
Exactly. Yeah, it's true. It's very true. But at the time, it was like the biggest checks they wrote or the biggest potential bets they saw, they would basically just drop one of us in. And your job was to like, what is the pitch?
Dude, it's what we
how do we get our first couple design partners?
It's what Kaylin and I are doing.
How do we price the POC?
Totally.
What's the profile of the first rep look like? How do you get your first 500K? How are you going to tell this Series A story? And I was like, oh, it's kind of interesting. I think that job would be epic if it was slightly larger companies, right? Because a lot of what you're doing, in my opinion, is actually the founder's job. And you may, and this might be controversial, I think you're doing sometimes a disservice in letting them outsource some of that stuff. Like they have to do it.
Do you know how this happens in practice? We get a bunch of inbound from founders that are at 500K of revenue that want to play hot potato, and we say no to it. We actually then flip it into like, hey, use our advisory services to jump in, because to me, it's a disservice for somebody to take a founding AE role full-time, put all their eggs in their basket, only to not be set up for success. Founder needs to do that. Like, especially because you're only going to get 50 basis points, maybe 100 or 1% if you're lucky. Like, you got to earn that almost. And I completely agree. Now, did you ever think about going on the investing side? I say this because when I was in business school, I came in actually thinking I wanted to go into VC. And the reason why after 3 months I said no to that was because I wanted to operate for a little bit longer. Because to me, investing seems like the easy skill to learn in early stages. A lot of bets, a lot of back of the napkin math. It's a lot of like, hey, let's throw events and meet founders and see as many things here, versus like Craft Ventures is big on this. So is like Kleiner. It's what's the alpha here? The alpha is like actually have operated before. But I hear Liam on podcasts, we're having him on in a couple of weeks, and he's like, I'm not an architect, I'm a brick builder. Well, I actually think that the brick building is the more important skill, but you've seen it a lot closer than I have. So people that are considering VC as an investor versus an operator versus do I start as an operator, can go to investor, or they don't let that chasm get crossed. Like, tell us a little bit more, because there's plenty of people in sales that I talk to that say, oh, I eventually want to go into VC.
I think a lot of people fantasize that job.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I'm a VC. And you go home at Christmas and you tell people, and that sounds really good. But like, is that the thing you really want to be doing? Because if you're in that in early stage, your real job is like, how can you flirt with a bunch of 22-year-old technical founders, right? And like, I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm going to be uniquely good at that. Like, I don't know if I have an understanding of where the world is going. I didn't think I had some unique ins to these companies. Looking back, maybe I did, because like, I think a lot of these technical founders really need help with some smart go-to-market minds. But I was never like, oh, I really want to be this investor. I think mostly because there's a part of me that's like, I want to be the guy. I want to figure that thing out. And that's why I kind of did the Champify thing. I think maybe later at some point being an investor would be cool, but I don't know. You're competing against really smart people, right? Like really smart people that have been thinking deeply about this stuff for a long time. So I don't know. I'm not like super drawn to the investor thing that a lot of people are.
So you're like, hey,
but the flip side, just sorry to interrupt, is
like,
business model wise, like just thinking from an entrepreneur standpoint, it's incredible.
Totally.
right? Like borrow other people's money, get a ton of leverage on bets you can
And
make,
you
get
have
paid these
preferred, and
management
you're preferred
fees.
shares.
Like there's
You
a
get paid.
huge
Yeah, yeah.
like structural, it's an amazing business model if
Totally.
it'll continue. I know it's people are saying it's getting a lot harder to make money in VC, but like the business model part I liked, like the day to day, I don't know if I'd be really uniquely good at it.
That's interesting. How would somebody, I guess, like before we move off, because I want to hear how, all right, we're at Unusual and go to Champify. How do you know if you'd be good at VC? Hey, I'm an extrovert. I'm obsessed with tech. I love going to events. I love meeting with as many founders. Like, what are the things that if somebody says yes to these, what need to be true for someone to say, actually, the VC investor route would be a good one?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it's
right?
just
I
so
really
different
don't
for
know the
everyone.
answer.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who had a similar background to me that now went to be an early stage investor. And I caught up with him and I said, how's it going? And his answer made me laugh. He goes, I don't know. And I think that's the reality of early stage. Like you don't know for a long time how it's going. And there's like a lot of like sitting by yourself, tinkering, thinking. And I'm like, I don't know if I'd like that.
Yeah.
You know, and the feedback loop, you're in early stage sales, you try a new pitch, you have a deal, it works or not. You learn, you iterate, like we're talking hours, right? Their bets, like you don't know for 4 years.
Totally.
You know, and I don't know if I would be good at that. I'm probably not patient enough.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
And I'm probably too optimistic where I'm like, I remember people would send me like,
oh, totally.
They thought I could influence like, oh, can you get us to invest? I was like, I have zero influence here. And also like, I would have said yes to all these ideas.
Totally. Yeah. Super. And so you're at Unusual. You're like, eventually, okay, I've had all these learnings. I want to be the guy though. Tell us a little bit about that progression into like, how did Champify? Was it something that you were seeing in the design plays that you were running?
Yeah, two things. So the first thing is a point you said around like, hey, you get 50 bips or 1%. Like I think most of the time, the early stage head of sales bet is just a bad financial bet. Like
they should be getting more. Isn't it kind of
yeah. The problem is people will keep taking it. So like the market will determine what that price is. But I think it's a great career bet in terms of accelerate your learnings. You do have some upside in the chance that it becomes the next Figma or one of these massive companies. But like you're going to work almost as hard as the founder. Sure, you don't have the same level of pressure because you can quit. They can't. Right. But like, yeah, if you're getting 50 to 80 basis points, you're going to work just as much. You have just as much pressure and sometimes more because you're kind of can get fired way easier. If you actually look at the math of how much you're going to get diluted, and if it goes really well, you're going to get topped. If it goes terrible, you're going to get fired. And if it goes middle, you're probably not making a ton of money on the equity anyway. So like it's this bet that I think is just not that smart in terms of like calculated kind of risk to upside. For me, I was kind of thinking through that math and I think I was coming to that realization. I think maybe if there was a company that I was working with that I was really excited about and I've kind of de-risked it, I have a relationship with the founders, we already know what we're getting into, maybe I would have jumped in, but none of those companies I felt that with. And then as I was doing the day-to-day work, I had gotten pretty far from what is a BDR doing, what is an AE doing, prospecting, right? I was like manager of managers. Like I wasn't doing that as much when I was at Heap. And Heap, we built outbound teams. Like we never had a marketer in seat more than like 15 months, right? So like in the beginning, sure, there was some inbound. We quickly got to 5-6 million and like it was an outbound
eventually,
thing, right? Like heavy 23-year-old SDRs, early adopters of the tech at the time, outreach, Zoom info, Clearbit, all this stuff. And like we could get kids getting 20 meetings a month, like consistently. And like we could scale that thing. And then when I started to do this at Unusual, like, hey, I partner with Chris, you're a nerdy founder, you're trying to figure out your first 20 customers.
Exactly.
I was like, holy shit, this is a lot harder. Like you can't just put people into an outreach cadence and like you can go get a bunch of meetings. So I was starting to see that. And then my co-founder had just left Heap and he was thinking about Champify. And originally he was like, we should go do this together. And
what was that overlap of how long you were? Was it almost early on?
Like 6 months into Unusual, I started thinking about like what's next. And the agreement I had with them is like, hey, I'm going to do this for 6 to 18 months. Like it was supposed to be a short-term thing. I think they were hoping I'd jump into one of their companies.
Right.
And I was like, maybe I will, but I can't commit to that. I don't even know what these companies are. Right. But what happened was I started running the same playbook that we were running at Unusual for Champify. I was like, okay, let's just assume Unusual just led an investment into Champify. What would we do? and a couple hours a week, I would go and do that. And I would encourage people that are in this like idea, customer development, thinking through what to do is like, I think Unusual's field guide they have on their website is like,
they have some really good content.
Really good content for how to do this. And I think, it's John Veronis, who's like very good early stage, and Jody, who's the founder of Harness and Traceable and a couple others. It's really good content, but we started doing that. And I had like 30 conversations with people, some in the network, some strangers that we went and booked meetings with. And I was like, all right, there's some pull for this thing. Like how much, I don't know, but there is pull for this. And
how did you know that was going to be even so it goes back to, we run a lot of plays for our advisory and go-to-market engineering, similar to how you probably are, how you're even getting design partners. I wrote an article on this. It's like the Mount Rushmore of go-to-market engineering plays. It's warm intros, of course, like the VC friendlies. It's like it's like the web analytics stuff that's really working. The other play, if it's too early, there's not enough champions. But there's certainly people who recently joined a company.
Yeah.
So that's another play that's been really successful. I've chatted with the Unify guys about this a bunch. That's a popular play on top of their web analytics one. How did you know that the Champify or was it a Heap thing? Was it unusual?
It was a Heap thing. It was a Heap thing. Yeah. At Heap, I would be in QBRs and I would say, how did this deal move so fast?
It was a former champ.
I would say, how did this deal move so fast? Heap had like 5,000 companies using the product by the time I left. And there was like fill a US football stadium with the number of users. Like it was like 80,000 monthly active users. And our best deals were someone who was at a startup in San Francisco that went to a big company. And now they were a product manager. Now they're director of product, and they were bringing us in.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, these are all the fastest moving deals. The outbound thing I saw was getting much harder. And I'm like, there's no way this is going to get easier.
I mean, it's brutal right now.
There's no way it's going to get, and now it's probably 20 times harder than it was 4 years ago.
LinkedIn hits so much better, but email, it's just brutal.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts in that. But then like, what did we do? A lot of the warm connections. Like people are like, oh, well, I think people overvalue like, oh, let's set up a million different plays in Clay in the early days. It's like, yo, your job is to brute force, go get 50 meetings. Like that means
you don't get, I love your quote, you don't get points for orchestrating.
Yeah, people build these tables. I'm like, you don't get a point for that. Dude, it doesn't matter. Like what I'm going to do is text two people I know and say, hey, I know you're with him. Can you like do that? You're not penalized for that. The goal is to get meetings, right? Like that's the atomic unit of growing these software companies 99% of the time.
Yeah.
But that's what we did. And people ask me like, what do you do to get your first 10 customers? I say, you scratch, crawl, do whatever you need to do to make that happen. And it's usually some form of, can you connect me to this person? Can you work with this person? Don't get me wrong. We were doing some cold outbound and stuff too. It's just like,
it's like, how do you get familiarity when you don't have, at that point, it's like warm intros. And then eventually people start using your product as a compounding motion. That's why Champify
100%
is more like mid-market enterprise, because you need enough data points.
That's exactly it.
Salesforce fields.
And then the other thing is like, if I always tell the founders, like, what do you have that is unique? Like you have something. For me, I had done the role of the people I'm selling to at Champify, and I can share a lot about the learnings. And then immediately they're like, oh, this person's smart. I'll talk to them. And then, I'll hear them out about their product, right? If you're a technical founder that has done something about observability at a big company, and now you're starting something, write about it, talk about it, right? And the reach, the stuff we're doing right now, it's just insane.
Yeah.
Right. So like start writing a blog like you're doing, start writing on LinkedIn like I'm doing. Like you have to do something, because just pure cold, especially if you're younger with no network, it's just very, very hard.
So let's say you had 1 week to book as many meetings as possible with a product that no one's ever used or heard of. I'll actually go first. What I think I would do, and I'm curious if you would agree with this, it's warm intros. So that could be from advisors, investors, or current employees, however many of those that you have. Next would be like the website analytics, anyone that's hitting your website, but a lot of times it's a little bit less. If no one's coming to your website, new hires. So like here, our ICP, and hopefully this is pretty well defined. People want to make an impact in their first 3 to 6 months. So reaching out, just saying like, hey, would love to float an idea by you. On the flip side of that, the third thing I would do is it's the whole ask for feedback, get money, ask for money, get feedback. The thing that's hitting right now for us, I mean, we work with companies that only have 8 customers. How do we get them to 15? We reach out to their current connections and we say like, hey, can you give us feedback? 30% of those come into meetings. So like, that's what I would do. What would be some plays that like you have 0 customers or you have 2 customers and you have 1 week or else you get fired, what are the things you
I
would?
think it's pretty similar. I think the first
Yeah.
thing is the feedback thing works. Like
It
people
is by
want to
far.
say, hey, you have some insight, you're taking a shot, you're leaving a big opportunity to go start this because you feel conviction in something. And most people want to hear about that. They're like, what are you seeing? What are you learning?
Totally.
And so it's, yes, here's a thesis I have. I'm reaching out to you specifically because I'm trying to get feedback on exactly this and make it easy to say yes, which is like, hey, here's a little teaser on what I want to talk more about. Here's a very short Loom video to get you a little bit more excited. And tell them like, hey, I don't have anything to sell you yet, right? Eventually, I'm going to come back and try to sell you something. I always tell people really honestly, like, if you have a problem I can fix, I'm going to sell you something, but I'm not here to sell you something yet. So the feedback thing, in the example, when you have 8 customers, like all those people who are using the product the most, mine their network. Like we have someone on our team. If I have a conversation with you and I help you out with something on recruiting, right after I send it to our ops person, they mine all your network. I send you something, say, hey, can you intro to me to these 7 people you're connected? Here's the pre-written email. Like
Totally.
do that thing. People say they do it, they don't. Like you can do it way more. That's one thing I think people don't do enough. And then on the last thing is some form of go create breadcrumbs. So like, are you doing something to drive people to your site and then you could see who those people are and reach out? Or are you writing on LinkedIn and seeing who's engaging with this stuff and then being able to reach out? So just trying to create some form of warmth. That's the other thing.
100%. I mean, one of our founders that we work with, Marty at Pylon, does an amazing job of this. He's done this
He's
for 2
incredible.
years. Yeah, he's
like,
the
he's
best
a really
at
good
it.
marketer.
Yep. And then people just go, oh, he's like, he was talking about how he gained 30 pounds eating Factor meals. It has nothing to do with support software, but it's like, hey, what is this guy? This guy's like a real person, you know? It's like that sort of stuff.
He's really good at it.
Totally. The thing that I've actually seen with a commoditized product like sales, or not commoditized, but a really crowded market is some of our clients started like a customer advisory board, people that are more manager or director level that haven't got advisor seats yet, and they're not going to get really bips or payment, but it gives them some sort of social status. And you could probably, if you have good enough relationship, ask them for their connections. But sometimes if they're at a good enough company and they took a bet on you, it's like, hey, how do we like get it on your LinkedIn and then that sort of stuff. And then you get, it just little steps like that. I've seen people get some,
yeah, we started that when we did Champify and it helped in the beginning for sure.
I've seen that.
Again, you're just getting some way to create some form of
you move the ball forward, however, it's social.
Right?
And it just, somebody just even doing that is because like social proof.
The other thing is people don't realize like it gets easier. Like getting your 10th meeting is a lot easier than getting your first, and getting your 100th is a lot easier than getting your 10th. So like you have to do whatever it takes in the beginning. And I think if your answer is like, oh, let me tweak my message and send 10,000 more emails, I think that's a losing game.
Totally. Got to be a pirate, as they say. Well, before we move on, I just want to do some lightning round, but like AI and sales with Champ, like, well, maybe before we even move off it. So Champify right now really is one of the leading tools that help you just track some of your champions that have left. So more mid-market enterprise clients. Like tell us a little bit more of what you guys do and just
right over 100 customers. We only work with, to give you an idea, like the average employee count at our customers is around, or the median is like 1,300 employees. Yeah, wow. So it's like mostly, you know, a couple hundred employees to many thousands of employees. And I think there's a perception of us of like, you know, how complicated is that tech or what are you doing? The reality though is any big organization, there's so much warmth that exists and people don't do it. People do not have a system for it. Right. So I always tell people on a call, like whether you pay us or one of our competitors or someone overseas or an ops intern, like do something because there's just so much warmth that exists.
Get the low hanging fruit.
Go get it.
Instead of just like,
I'll go into big organizations and we have this like data exercise that we run and people say, no, my reps are kind of doing some of this already. And they're missing 9 out of 10. So I'm like, okay, you're telling me it's smarter to spin up some outbound AI slop to cold people, and you have 8,000 people that are in your ICP accounts that have used your product and you're not spending time on them. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Right. So our foray was really pretty narrow. It was just like outbound is going to continue to go down in effectiveness. We're talking about it right now. Companies that have delivered good experiences have way more warmth than they think, and you need a dedicated solution to tap into that. Right. Now what we're doing is like our vision here is how do you own as much of this warmth-based selling as possible? So like started with former customers and buyers. And to do that, you need to integrate with product analytics well. You need to tap into people's calendar because they have shitty Salesforce hygiene. You
I was
need
just
to
going
do
to
it.
say, what if people don't? Yeah, I mean,
Most
reps are
people don't,
notorious.
right?
Yeah,
But
so
I'll tell you what, like
you got to connect.
calendar APIs are really good now. And we've gotten really good at saying, hey, you don't have great Salesforce data, but all of your people are having meetings. Great. We'll look back the last
Google,
3 years.
Outlook,
We'll enrich this
mostly
list.
Google.
We know who they are. And on day one, here's 500, 1,000, 2,000 people that are going to respond 6, 8, 10 times better than any outbound thing you're going to do. The next thing we're really excited is just, I think almost universally, organizations are really bad at how they handle re-engagement.
Yeah.
Like the best orgs in the world, you're going to lose 7 out of 10 deals. Like I saw the kid at Gong write about, I forget, Brian Lamana.
Yeah.
I think he writes really good stuff. He was talking about his win rate. And I'm like, all right, you're at one of the hottest companies with like one of the, in my opinion, the best CEOs tapping into all this AI trend. Your win rate's 27%. So 3 out of 4 deals you're losing. How are you doing that at scale to go back to these people, right? So we built a purpose-built AI that integrates the Gong and Clary. And what you see is like, okay, at a large organization, you have thousands of deals that you've lost and reps turnover, accounts change, you lose a ton of context.
You lose that like knowledge.
100%.
Yeah.
They put in shitty CRM notes. They're actually usually afraid to put in the real loss reason because their manager is kind of barking at them.
100%.
And now you can have this purpose-built AI. It's like, hey, you should go back after Chris in February of 2026 because this is what he said about a budget freeze and their end of their contract renewal. And like people miss a ton of that, right? So like that's the next flavor of warmth that we're delivering for our customers. I want to continue to build on that.
I love it. It's what we always try to do when we go into client engagement. What's the low hanging fruit? Every company has an edge, a data moat, as Clay would call it. So or some sort of alpha. Let's find that like data alpha a little. I think when we were chatting, like what I wanted this podcast to be is like 20 sales meets my first million. Like some of the questions in 20 sales that they asked, like the lightning fire at the end. There's a few that I always found really interesting in that. The one being like maybe just like one use case that is like working in AI and go to market and one that's super overrated or you think people are just full of shit a little bit on LinkedIn.
If I'm really honest, I think most of the AI and go to market is super underwhelming.
Yeah.
Like if you have a very SMB product and you're like trying to operationalize this like transactional sales motion, I think there's some really good stuff. Like the meeting prep matters way more because if you have 8 demos in a day, like or how you're doing email follow-ups or how you're building quotes. Like I think there's a lot of interesting stuff. I think it's been super underwhelming if you're doing bigger deals because like most of it isn't really a tech problem. Sure, it's great now for research. It's great now for helping with follow-ups. It's great now to use some of the Gong stuff. But if you really ask an enterprise seller, what are you doing with AI? Like, sure, it helps you build a deck faster. You can build some content that looks really personalized for customers. But like, I don't think much of that is like dramatically moving the needle, at least not yet. Yeah, I'm curious if you disagree with that.
So I would not want to be implementing AI solutions at a larger company right now. I think it's just like, it's too much of a web that like the band-aids of like stitching all that. I like the fact that we can be early stage. The reason why our reply rates are super high is because I just jump in the founders LinkedIn and people answer. See, it goes back to our question earlier. I'm allowed to be cut corners a little because we are literally in the trenches. So I am not best to know from like mid-market and above because that's just not really where we play. What Clay does, and that's like the centerpiece of what we do with our go-to-market engineering engagements, it just creates leverage. It allows us to do, and there's always a human in the loop. There's no AI SDRs that we implement. There's no really agentic or just fully automated except for the web to auto message. If they hit ICP and Clay sits in the middle of all that, most of it's just like get us from 0 to 90 really quick. Then we go in with a quick check and make sure everybody's name's not in all caps. And it's been very good for someone like myself to be able to like, we're working on multiple projects and can we just ship out things? And we help our clients like speed up that learning curve and instill like an experimentation culture. But I'm with you that like, we're not fully there. But I think the companies that are this and they're making the mistakes will be there for like the next realm of things. So
the take I have on a lot of that, I think like, yes, it's good to set that up. You're getting a bunch more volume. I think like if you can go log into the founder's LinkedIn, like that's going to have way more success than any thing you're spinning up.
Or I guess GTM, as I love the
I'll tell you what though,
brand.
Champify, like don't get me wrong, we do a lot of the stuff you're talking about. But like if I have 1 hour, I'm spending like right now, gun to my head, go book as many meetings as you can today. I'm putting our best reps on the phones.
Yeah.
Like that thing still works.
Unique to selling a sales tech product
Yes.
too. You know, it's another thing. So we've advised for 2 sales tech, or in the last 6 months, 2 sales tech companies. Send Spark to Clay has actually been amazing. And what the variable tags are in that is their first name. So you say like, hey, Todd. But then you actually have their website in the background. We've actually gotten a ton of meetings, especially selling sales tech. They're not sure if they're interested in the product. They want to know how he did that.
There's a lot of that.
So
a lot of when we're selling, people are saying, how did you guys do that?
Exactly.
Or what do you do on that? And then again, the way you sell is becoming more important because products all look a lot similar today, right?
Totally.
So like the way you sell matters. And if that's how you get into meetings, great. Because all you're trying to do, again, the atomic unit, get into a lot of meetings. Video, yeah, it works a lot. I think LinkedIn voice messages, like there's some, that thing's real. Like it's just something different. But like, I think a lot of this stuff, Clay and N8 and all of that, like a lot of it is a distraction to like, hey, your team should be picking up the phone. If your buyer has like a connect rate of 5 to 8%, like
tell that to the dev tool companies.
Go do that.
Yeah.
Like, now everyone will say, oh, dev doesn't answer the phone. Like, yeah, go look at MongoDB. Like, how much money they booked for over the phone. It's a lot, right? So I don't know how long that window's open, but like it's open right now.
What's a sales tactic or thing that's just completely dead nowadays? Or at least just like is cringe compared to 10 years ago? That's just not working.
I just think like there's still a lot of organizations that are just like sitting with their SDRs that have templated outreach cadences and are like, just follow this thing. I'm like, why? Why are you spending time on this? It doesn't work anymore. It might do more damage than good. I think the way we're seeing this is like email's going to split. So like the sales organization, you have someone nerdier with yourself that knows how to use Clay or other tools.
Exactly.
And emails like looked at as this low cost ad, stay top of mind for people. Response rates are going to be terrible. And then the reps are doing highly, highly personalized creative stuff that doesn't really scale. And the teams are going to be smaller that do that.
Do college athletes make better salespeople? You've interviewed them. You were one of them. What's the take on that?
I don't know about better. I remember.
Is there a correlation or causation?
I don't know. I never really looked at that of like, hey, what happened at the end? I think like probably, right? But I don't think it has to be an athlete. Like I think you can do the same thing with a musician, right? Like musician, you're sitting there and like you're messing up and you have to get better consistently. Like you have to just, having done hard things for a long period of time and having the discipline, I think that matters a lot. I think that does lend itself to a lot of athletes, but I think there's other ways to do it too.
Cool. That gives NARPs like myself a fighting chance of success out there.
I think
in the
musician's
GTM,
good, right? Or like just like you've done some hard things. I think the biggest thing for the like sales rep success thing is just like the people say this, but like the curiosity. And I think you learn way more in an interview by the questions they ask than the answers, right? I think that's like the biggest
It's such a subjective term though, because it's like, I've been told that. I got feedback once and I was like curious. I just listened to 3 podcasts and your CEO, like, what am I not doing to show that? And I think that like, what do the best people do to show that they're curious other than like prep?
I've thought a lot about this because
like,
I used to say the same thing. What does
even
curiosity
Everybody's
mean?
kind of
like,
curious.
Everyone asks the same question. I think there's two flavors of this that usually come out. There's the first flavor of the person that's really understanding like, what is the competitive landscape? What's our right to win? Where is this going in a couple of years? And like thinking deeply about like, okay, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to do some deals over the first 6 to 12 months, but like think through where this area is going, what's happening to the space. And I think the second part tends to be like, most salespeople are pretty entrepreneurial. If you like go and poll most of these salespeople, like, how do I make enough money to go do my own thing? That's the reality, whether people want to say it or not. And I think what another flavor of that curiosity comes through is people really trying to understand the economics of the business.
Yeah.
Like, how do we scale this thing? How much money do we need to raise? What do we do this? They might not even know really what it is, but just like wanting to learn that is probably a good sign.
Yeah. Well, so there's so much more we can dive into
100%.
that. I think the last thing I want to I saw you're a big Sahil Bloom fan. You recently read his book. I actually just did a post this morning on GTMBA about the Medici effect of how like SF is becoming that, just like get into these hubs. New York's like that as well. Not all, I'm jealous that you made the move to Florida to avoid some of these insane taxes, but that's a whole other conversation. But tell me a little bit more. What are you consuming book wise, podcast wise? What are some things?
I really like him. I really like his new book and I find myself gifting it a lot because I think people aren't really intentional about what they want, right? Like what game do you want to play? right? Like, yeah, you can go get another hot job and another role and move up one, but like, is that the game you want to play?
Yep.
And I think maybe it's because I'm getting like middle age now. I'm like 35 years old. I'm really thinking about like, what is the game I want to play? What is the thing I want to do?
Yeah.
I'm recently married, so like my priorities are probably changing a little bit. And I just like the way he talks about like, there's kind of five flavors of wealth and what one are you optimizing at different point in your life. And like, I don't know, it really hits with me.
Yeah.
The other favorite book I have is called Tribe. It's by Sebastian Junger, who wrote Perfect Storm. Basic premise is
Perfect Storm, like the George Clooney movie
yes,
book?
he wrote that, but then he did this
Hell of a
documentary
captain,
called,
hell of a ship, hell of a,
called
right.
Restrepo. He basically went and lived in Afghanistan during the war over there and got really close with a platoon or a group. And he talks about how like they were getting shot at. And that was one of the happiest moments he has because he was with a small group of people, his tribe. And like, I think a lot of us, and again, I'm getting to the age where my friends are all having kids and getting married and moving to different parts of the country and all of that. He just talks about there's this like epidemic in America where you like make more money and then go build a house and then you just see your friends a lot less and you have less community. And I think that stuff matters. I think it actually relates to early stage companies too. Like it's fun being in the trenches with people trying to win, right? Like that is fun. We're wired to be in small groups to do that. So I always think about it.
I love it. I'm going to do a post next week on how Tribe taught me about B2B sales or whatever. Yeah. Those posts always get me. But dude, great to hang. This is an awesome hour.
Yeah,
appreciate it. And love nerd out on GTM topics and all this stuff.
I think this was great.
Thanks for tuning in to the VibeScaling podcast. My name is Chris Balestris, partner at VibeScaling. VibeScaling's an advisory, recruiting, media, and investing firm. We work with seed through Series C companies. The VibeScaling podcast has some of the top go-to-market leaders at these AI and SaaS companies, talking everything from 0 to 1, how to choose companies, swings and misses that folks have taken in their career. So if you're interested in the intersection of go-to-market, AI, and startups, this is the podcast for you and hope you really enjoy listening.